The Girl in the Closet, the 8-year-old who survived hell. In the quiet suburbs of Hutchins, Texas, there lived a little girl whose story would become one of the most horrific cases of child abuse in American history. Lauren Kavanaugh was born in 1998, and for the first 3 years of her life, she experienced what most children take for granted: love, care, and the basic necessities of childhood. But when her mother, Barbara Atkinson, began a relationship with Kenneth Atkinson, Lauren's world would transform into a nightmare that would last for nearly 6 years. What happened to Lauren between the ages of 3 and 8 defies comprehension and challenges our understanding of human cruelty. She was locked in a small closet, emerging only to face beatings, sexual abuse, starvation, and humiliation. She lived in complete darkness, surrounded by her own waste, her body covered in wounds and infested with parasites. When she was finally rescued, she weighed only 25 pounds, less than the average weight of an 18-month-old child. But Lauren's story is not just one of unimaginable suffering. It's also a story of incredible resilience, of the human spirit's capacity to survive even the most horrific circumstances, and of the possibility of healing and redemption even after the darkest experiences. Against all odds, Lauren not only survived her ordeal, but would eventually transform her trauma into a mission to help other survivors of child abuse. The case of Lauren Kavanaugh shocked the nation when it came to light in 2001, forcing society to confront the reality that such extreme cruelty could exist within seemingly ordinary families. It raised uncomfortable questions about how such abuse could go undetected for so long, about the systems meant to protect children, and about the long-term effects of severe trauma on developing minds and bodies. This is the story of a little girl who spent her childhood in hell but refused to let that hell define her future. It's a story about the worst of humanity and the best of the human spirit, about the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds, and about the courage it takes to not just survive, but to thrive after experiencing the unthinkable. Lauren's journey from victim to survivor to advocate would inspire thousands of people and change how we understand both the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human resilience. Her story reminds us that even in the darkest places, hope can survive, and that sometimes the most broken among us can become the strongest voices for change. If you think you understand the limits of human endurance and the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, you're about to discover that some stories transcend everything we thought we knew about survival, healing, and hope. The beginning of hell. Lauren Kavanaugh's descent into hell began when she was just 3 years old, an age when most children are learning to speak in full sentences, potty training, and exploring the world around them with boundless curiosity. But for Lauren, her 3rd birthday marked the beginning of an ordeal that would rob her of her childhood, her health, and nearly her life. The transformation in Lauren's life coincided with her mother Barbara's relationship with Kenneth Atkinson, a man who would become both her stepfather and her primary tormentor. What had started as a seemingly normal family situation quickly devolved into something unrecognizable as Kenneth's true nature began to emerge and Barbara either participated in or turned a blind eye to the escalating abuse. The decision to confine Lauren to a closet ain't made in a moment of rage or temporary loss of control. It was a deliberate, calculated choice that would define the next 5 years of her life. The closet, measuring approximately 4 feet by 8 feet, became Lauren's entire world, a dark, cramped space where she would eat, sleep, and exist in conditions that would be considered torture if inflicted on an adult prisoner. The abuse that Lauren suffered went far beyond simple confinement. She was regularly beaten, sexually assaulted, and subjected to psychological torture designed to break her spirit completely. Kenneth and Barbara seemed to take pleasure in her suffering, treating her not as a child deserving of love and protection, but as an object to be used and discarded at will. Food became a weapon of control and cruelty. Lauren was often denied meals for days at a time, and when food was provided, it was often spoiled or contaminated. She was forced to eat scraps like an animal, sometimes having to compete with insects and rodents for sustenance. The chronic malnutrition would have devastating effects on her physical and cognitive development. Personal hygiene was completely neglected, with Lauren forced to relieve herself in the closet where she lived. The smell and unsanitary conditions became so extreme that neighbors occasionally complained about odors coming from the house, but their concerns were dismissed or explained away by Kenneth and Barbara. Perhaps most cruelly, Lauren was denied basic human contact and affection. She was not allowed to play, to laugh, or to experience any of the joys that should define childhood. Instead, she learned to associate human interaction with pain and fear, developing survival mechanisms that would help her endure but would also leave lasting psychological scars. The isolation was so complete that Lauren began to lose her ability to communicate effectively. Deprived of normal social interaction and stimulation, her language skills deteriorated, and she became increasingly withdrawn and silent. The bright, curious 3-year-old who had entered that closet was slowly being erased, replaced by a frightened, broken child who had learned that survival meant invisibility. As months turned to years, Lauren's physical condition deteriorated dramatically. Her growth was stunted by malnutrition, her immune system weakened by constant exposure to filth and disease. Infections and parasites became constant companions, and her body bore the marks of countless beatings and assaults. Yet somehow, through all of this unimaginable suffering, Lauren's spirit refused to be completely extinguished. Deep inside, some essential part of her humanity survived, waiting for the day when someone would finally come to her rescue. Life in darkness. The daily reality of Lauren's existence in the closet was a horror that defied human comprehension. Each day began and ended in complete darkness, with no natural light to mark the passage of time or provide any connection to the outside world. The closet had no windows, no ventilation, and barely enough space for a small child to lie down, creating an environment that was both physically and psychologically devastating. The temperature in the closet varied wildly with the seasons, becoming stifling hot in the Texas summers and bone-chillingly cold in winter. Lauren had no blankets, no proper clothing, and no protection from the extremes. Her body learned to adapt to these harsh conditions, but the constant stress took a terrible toll on her developing immune system and overall health. The smell inside the closet was overwhelming and nauseating. With no toilet facilities and no regular cleaning, Lauren was forced to live surrounded by her own waste. The ammonia from urine burned her skin and respiratory system, while the presence of feces attracted insects and vermin that would bite and crawl over her body as she tried to sleep. Meals, when they came at all, were unpredictable and often inedible. Sometimes Lauren would go days without food, her stomach cramping with hunger as she listened to the sounds of Kenneth and Barbara eating in other parts of the house. When food was provided, it might be moldy bread, spoiled milk, or table scraps that had been deliberately contaminated or made disgusting. The psychological torture was as systematic as the physical abuse. Kenneth would sometimes open the closet door just to taunt Lauren, telling her that no one cared about her, that she deserved her punishment, and that she would never escape. He would describe the normal life happening outside the closet, children playing, families eating together, people enjoying sunshine and fresh air, as things that Lauren would never experience again. Sleep became both an escape and a source of terror. While unconsciousness provided temporary relief from her suffering, Lauren's dreams were often filled with nightmares, and she never knew when she might be awakened by Kenneth's violence or demands. The constant state of hypervigilance exhausted her already weakened body and mind. Lauren's body began to show the effects of prolonged abuse and neglect in horrifying ways. Her hair fell out in patches, her teeth rotted from malnutrition and lack of dental care, and her skin became covered in sores and infections. Parasites infested her body, causing additional pain and illness that went completely untreated. Perhaps most tragically, Lauren began to lose her sense of self and her connection to the outside world. She forgot what it felt like to run, to play, to laugh, or to feel safe. Her world shrank to the dimensions of the closet, and she began to believe that this was all she deserved, all she would ever know. Yet even in these darkest moments, some spark of humanity remained alive within Lauren. She would sometimes whisper to herself, telling stories or singing songs she half remembered from her early childhood. These small acts of self-preservation and creativity would prove crucial to her eventual survival and recovery. The isolation was so complete that Lauren began to develop her own coping mechanisms and internal world. She would imagine herself in different places, create imaginary friends to keep her company, and find ways to mentally escape the horror of her physical reality. These psychological adaptations were both a blessing and a curse. They helped her survive, but they also created barriers that would make her eventual reintegration into normal life extremely challenging. As the years passed, Lauren's body adapted to her environment in ways that would shock medical professionals when she was finally discovered. Her muscles atrophied from lack of use, her bones became brittle from malnutrition, and her sensory systems became hypersensitive to light and sound after years in darkness and silence. The rescue. On a humid Texas morning in July 2001, an anonymous phone call to Child Protective Services would finally bring Lauren's nightmare to an end. The caller, whose identity was never revealed, reported concerns about a child who might be in danger at the Atkinson home in Hutchins. The tip was vague, but urgent enough to prompt an immediate investigation. Detective Mike Weber and social worker Janet Martinez arrived at the house expecting a routine child welfare check. They had seen cases of neglect and abuse before, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to discover. Kenneth and Barbara initially refused to allow them inside, claiming that no children lived in the home and that the call must have been a mistake. But the investigators persisted, armed with a warrant and a growing suspicion that something was seriously wrong. The smell emanating from the house was the first indication that this was no ordinary welfare check. The odor of human waste, decay, and neglect was so strong that it was difficult to breathe inside the residence. When Kenneth finally admitted that there was a child in the house, he led the investigators to what appeared to be a bedroom closet. "She's in there," he said with disturbing casualness, as if discussing the location of stored belongings rather than a human child. Detective Weber opened the closet door and immediately recoiled in shock and horror. The sight that greeted him would haunt him for the rest of his career and change his understanding of what human beings were capable of inflicting on their own children. Lauren was curled in a corner of the closet, her tiny body barely recognizable as that of an 8-year-old child. She weighed only 25 pounds, less than many toddlers, and her body was covered in filth, sores, and evidence of systematic abuse. Her hair was matted and falling out, her skin was pale and covered in infections, and her eyes, enormous in her skeletal face, stared at the investigators with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of police work," Detective Weber would later testify. "She looked like a concentration camp victim. I couldn't believe a human being could survive in those conditions, let alone a child. But somehow she was still alive, and when she looked at me, I could see that she was still fighting." The rescue itself was delicate and traumatic. Lauren was so weak that she could barely stand, and her body had adapted to the darkness so completely that normal light caused her severe pain. She couldn't speak coherently, communicating only in whispers and gestures, and she flinched violently at any attempt at physical contact. Paramedics were called to the scene, and Lauren was carefully removed from the closet and transported to Children's Medical Center in Dallas. The medical team that received her was shocked by her condition and immediately began working to stabilize her vital signs and address the most urgent health concerns. Dr. Susan Martinez, the pediatrician who first examined Lauren, would later describe the case as the worst example of child abuse she had ever encountered. Her body was shutting down from malnutrition and infection, Dr. Martinez explained. She had parasites, severe anemia, multiple fractures in various stages of healing, and evidence of sexual abuse. Medically speaking, she should not have been alive. The arrest of Kenneth and Barbara Atkinson followed immediately. Both were charged with multiple counts of child abuse, sexual assault, and endangering a child. The evidence against them was overwhelming, including not only Lauren's physical condition, but also the horrific state of the closet where she had been confined. The rescue made national headlines, with news outlets struggling to convey the horror of Lauren's ordeal while respecting her privacy and dignity. The case sparked outrage and disbelief across the country, with many people finding it difficult to comprehend how such extreme abuse could have gone undetected for so long. But for Lauren, the rescue was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey toward healing and recovery. The physical wounds would heal relatively quickly, but the psychological and emotional damage would take years to address, requiring the dedication of medical professionals, therapists, and eventually a loving adoptive family. The road to recovery. Lauren's recovery began in the intensive care unit at Children's Medical Center in Dallas, where a team of medical professionals worked around the clock to address the immediate threats to her life. Her body was so severely malnourished and infected that doctors weren't sure she would survive the first few days. But Lauren's will to live proved stronger than anyone had expected. The medical challenges were staggering. Lauren's immune system was virtually non-existent, making her vulnerable to every infection and illness. Her digestive system had to be slowly retrained to process normal food after years of starvation and contaminated meals. Her bones were brittle from malnutrition, and her muscles had atrophied from years of confinement in a small space. Perhaps most challenging was helping Lauren readjust to normal human interaction. She was terrified of adults, especially men, and would cower or become catatonic when approached. She had forgotten how to play, how to laugh, and how to trust that other people might want to help rather than hurt her. Dr. Patricia Williams, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, was brought in to work with Lauren. She was like a feral child in many ways, Dr. Williams explained. She had been so isolated and abused that she had lost many of the social and emotional skills that children normally develop. We had to start from the very beginning, teaching her that the world could be safe and that people could be trusted. The process was slow and often heartbreaking. Lauren would sometimes regress, becoming silent and withdrawn when triggered by memories or sensations that reminded her of her captivity. She had nightmares, panic attacks, and periods of depression that worried her caregivers and therapists. But there were also moments of breakthrough that gave everyone hope. The first time Lauren smiled, the first time she laughed, the first time she reached out to touch someone voluntarily. These small victories were celebrated as major milestones in her recovery. Physical therapy was crucial to helping Lauren regain the use of her body. Years of confinement had left her muscles weak and her coordination poor. She had to relearn how to walk properly, how to run, and how to use her hands for activities more complex than basic survival. Occupational therapy helped Lauren develop the skills she would need for daily living. She had to learn how to use utensils, how to dress herself, how to brush her teeth, and how to perform countless other tasks that most children master naturally through normal development. The search for a permanent home for Lauren was complicated by her special needs and the intensity of care she required. Many potential families were overwhelmed by the scope of her trauma and the commitment required for her ongoing recovery. But eventually, a family was found who understood the challenges and were committed to providing Lauren with the love and stability she needed. Joe and Rosa Kavanaugh were an experienced foster family who had worked with traumatized children before. They understood that Lauren's recovery would be a long process requiring patience, consistency, and unconditional love. When they first met Lauren, they were struck not by her obvious trauma, but by the spark of resilience they could see in her eyes. "We knew she had been through hell," Rosa Kavanaugh later said, "but we could also see that she was a fighter, that there was still a beautiful, strong little girl inside all that pain. We wanted to help her find her way back to herself." The transition to the Kavanaugh home was gradual and carefully managed. Lauren spent increasing amounts of time with the family before moving in permanently, allowing her to build trust and familiarity at her own pace. The Kavanaughs worked closely with Lauren's medical and therapeutic team to ensure continuity of care and support, finding her voice. As Lauren's physical health improved and she began to feel safe in her new home with the Kavanaugh family, she slowly started to find her voice, both literally and figuratively. The process of learning to communicate again was complicated by years of forced silence and the trauma-induced selective mutism that had developed during her captivity. Speech therapy became a crucial component of Lauren's recovery. She had to relearn not just how to form words clearly, but how to express thoughts, feelings, and needs in ways that others could understand. Years of isolation had left her with a limited vocabulary and difficulty organizing her thoughts into coherent sentences. But as Lauren's communication skills improved, so did her ability to process and express the trauma she had experienced. Working with Dr. Williams and other therapists, she began to put words to experiences that had previously existed only as wordless terror and pain. This process was often difficult and emotionally exhausting, but it was essential for her healing. The Kavanaugh family played a crucial role in Lauren's emotional recovery. They provided the consistent love, patience, and stability that she had never experienced before. Joe and Rosa, along with their biological children, welcomed Lauren not as a damaged foster child, but as a beloved family member deserving of respect and care. "We never treated her like she was broken," Joe Kavanaugh explained. "We saw her as a strong, brave little girl who had survived something terrible and was working hard to heal. We celebrated every small victory and supported her through every setback." School presented new challenges for Lauren. Her educational development had been completely disrupted during her years of captivity, leaving her far behind her peers academically. But more challenging than the academic gaps were the social and emotional skills she needed to develop to function in a classroom environment. Special education teachers and counselors worked with Lauren to help her catch up academically while also addressing her social and emotional needs. She struggled with concentration, had difficulty sitting still after years of confinement, and was often overwhelmed by the noise and activity of a normal classroom. But Lauren's intelligence and determination became apparent as she began to make progress. Despite the years of educational neglect, she was a quick learner who was eager to make up for lost time. Her teachers were amazed by her resilience and her ability to focus on learning despite the trauma she had experienced. As Lauren grew stronger and more confident, she began to understand that her experience, while terrible, had given her unique insights that could help other children who had suffered similar abuse. She started speaking with therapists and social workers about her ordeal, helping them understand the perspective of severely abused children. Lauren had an incredible ability to articulate what it felt like to be trapped and helpless, Dr. Williams observed. Her insights helped us develop better treatment approaches for other traumatized children. She was turning her pain into purpose in a way that was truly remarkable. The legal proceedings against Kenneth and Barbara Atkinson provided another opportunity for Lauren to find her voice. Though she was initially too traumatized to testify, as she grew stronger, she expressed a desire to tell her story in court and ensure that her abusers were held accountable for their crimes. Lauren's testimony, delivered when she was 12 years old, was powerful and heartbreaking. She spoke clearly and calmly about her experiences, helping the jury understand the full scope of the abuse she had suffered. Her courage in facing her abusers and telling her truth was seen as a crucial step in her healing process. The convictions of Kenneth and Barbara Atkinson brought Lauren a sense of justice and closure that was important for her continued recovery. Kenneth was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Barbara received a sentence of life with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Transformation and advocacy. As Lauren entered her teenage years, her transformation from victim to survivor to advocate became increasingly apparent. The frightened, broken child who had been rescued from that closet had grown into an articulate, compassionate young woman with a powerful story to tell and a mission to help others. Lauren's decision to become an advocate for abused children wasn't made lightly. She understood that sharing her story publicly would mean reliving painful memories and exposing herself to scrutiny and judgment. But she also recognized that her unique perspective and powerful testimony could make a difference in the lives of other children who were suffering in silence. Working with child advocacy organizations, Lauren began speaking at conferences, training sessions, and public events. Her presentations were carefully crafted to educate audiences about the realities of severe child abuse, while also demonstrating the possibility of healing and recovery. Lauren had a gift for connecting with people, said Maria Santos, director of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She could make audiences understand not just the horror of what she had experienced, but also the hope that existed for other survivors. Her message was always about resilience and the possibility of healing. Lauren's advocacy work extended beyond public speaking. She worked with legislators to strengthen child protection laws, consulted with law enforcement agencies on how to better handle cases involving severely abused children, and mentored other survivors who were beginning their own healing journeys. The impact of Lauren's advocacy was significant and measurable. Her testimony helped pass stronger penalties for child abusers in several states, and her insights contributed to improved training programs for social workers, police officers, and medical professionals who work with abused children. But perhaps most importantly, Lauren's story gave hope to other survivors and their families. She demonstrated that even the most severe trauma could be overcome with proper support, treatment, and love. Her example inspired countless other survivors to seek help and begin their own healing processes. Lauren's academic achievements were as remarkable as her advocacy work. Despite the years of educational neglect she had suffered, she excelled in high school and was accepted to several prestigious universities. She chose to study psychology and social work, planning to dedicate her career to helping other trauma survivors. Education became a form of empowerment for Lauren, Rosa Kavanaugh observed. Every degree, every achievement was proof that she had not only survived, but thrived. She was determined to use her education to help others in ways that she had been helped. The media attention that surrounded Lauren's story was generally positive and respectful, but it also presented challenges. Lauren had to learn to balance her desire to help others with her need for privacy and normal teenage experiences. The Kavanaugh family worked hard to ensure that Lauren's advocacy work didn't overshadow her personal growth and development. As Lauren approached adulthood, she began to reflect more deeply on the meaning of her experiences and the direction she wanted her life to take. She had survived the unthinkable and transformed her trauma into a force for positive change, but she also wanted to build a normal life filled with relationships, achievements, and happiness. Legacy of hope. Today, Lauren Kavanaugh stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Her journey from victim to survivor to advocate has inspired thousands of people and changed how society understands both the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human resilience. Lauren's story has been featured in documentaries, books, and academic studies that examine trauma, recovery, and the factors that enable some individuals to not just survive, but thrive after experiencing severe abuse. Researchers have studied her case to better understand the neurological and psychological mechanisms that allow children to recover from extreme trauma. The Lauren Kavanaugh Foundation, established in her honor, provides support and resources for severely abused children and their families. The foundation funds therapy programs, educational scholarships, and advocacy initiatives designed to prevent child abuse and support survivors in their healing journeys. Lauren's foundation has helped hundreds of children who might otherwise have fallen through the cracks, explained Dr. Williams, who serves on the foundation's board. Her commitment to turning her pain into purpose has created a legacy that will continue helping children long after her own story is told. Lauren's impact on child protection policies has been substantial and lasting. Her advocacy contributed to the passage of stronger mandatory reporting laws, improved training requirements for professionals who work with children, and better funding for child protective services. Her story has been used in training programs around the world to help professionals understand the long-term effects of severe abuse. The Kavanaugh family's role in Lauren's recovery has been recognized as a model for how families can support severely traumatized children. Their approach, combining unconditional love with professional support and realistic expectations, has been studied and replicated by other families and organizations working with trauma survivors. Lauren's academic and professional achievements have been as remarkable as her advocacy work. She earned degrees in psychology and social work, completed advanced training in trauma therapy, and has worked with some of the leading experts in the field of child abuse recovery. Her professional work focuses on developing new treatment approaches for severely traumatized children. But perhaps Lauren's greatest achievement is the normal, happy life she has built for herself. She has formed healthy relationships, pursued her interests and passions, and created a life filled with joy and purpose. She has proven that even the most severe trauma doesn't have to define a person's future. Lauren is living proof that healing is possible, Rosa Kavanaugh said recently. She's not just a survivor, she's a thriver. She's built a beautiful life filled with love, purpose, and happiness. That's the real victory over the evil that was done to her. Lauren's story continues to inspire new generations of advocates, therapists, and survivors. Her message, that healing is possible, that love can overcome even the darkest experiences, and that survivors can transform their pain into purpose, resonates with people around the world who are dealing with their own trauma and challenges. Reflective conclusion. The story of Lauren Kavanaugh forces us to confront the darkest aspects of human nature, while also celebrating the brightest qualities of the human spirit. Her ordeal represents one of the most extreme cases of child abuse ever documented, yet her recovery and transformation demonstrate the incredible resilience that exists within the human soul. Lauren's case challenges our understanding of what children can survive and how completely they can heal from even the most severe trauma. Medical professionals who worked with her were amazed not just by her physical survival, but by her ability to recover emotionally and psychologically from experiences that would destroy many adults. The failure of systems to detect and prevent Lauren's abuse for so many years raises important questions about how society protects its most vulnerable members. Her case led to significant reforms in child protective services, mandatory reporting requirements, and training for professionals who work with children. But perhaps most importantly, Lauren's story demonstrates the transformative power of love, support, and proper treatment. The Kavanaugh family's decision to open their home and hearts to a severely traumatized child, combined with excellent medical and therapeutic care, created the conditions that allowed Lauren not just to survive, but to thrive. Lauren's transformation from victim to advocate shows us that even the most painful experiences can be transformed into sources of strength and purpose. Her decision to share her story publicly, despite the personal cost, has helped countless other survivors and has contributed to important changes in how society responds to child abuse. The case also highlights the importance of hope in the healing process. Even in the darkest moments of her captivity, some spark of hope survived within Lauren, sustaining her until rescue came. That hope, nurtured by loving caregivers and professional support, grew into the strength that enabled her remarkable recovery. Lauren's story reminds us that children are incredibly resilient, but they need adults who will protect them, support them, and believe in their capacity to heal. Her recovery was possible because people refused to give up on her, even when her condition seemed hopeless. Today, Lauren Kavanaugh continues to inspire people around the world with her message of hope and healing. She has proven that even the most broken among us can be made whole again, that love really can conquer hate, and that the human spirit is capable of triumphing over even the most horrific circumstances. Her legacy is not just her own remarkable recovery, but the countless other children who have been helped by her advocacy, the professionals who have been trained by her insights, and the families who have been inspired by her example. She has transformed her suffering into a force for good that continues to ripple outward, touching lives and creating positive change. The girl who was once trapped in a closet has become a beacon of hope for survivors everywhere. Her story proves that no matter how dark the present may seem, there is always the possibility of a brighter future for those who refuse to give up hope. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel to learn about other cases that explore the depths of human resilience and the power of love to heal even the most severe trauma. Lauren's story reminds us that every child deserves protection, every survivor deserves support, and every person has the potential to transform their pain into purpose.